Hello and welcome to another one of my recordings. Through this recording, I'm going to cover some of the concepts on repetition structure, essentially performing loops in Python. As you know, we have already done repetition in Raptor, so you should be able to know the basic concept of repetitions. All we're doing is we're using a high-level programming language like Python to essentially implement our loops. So essentially through this recording we will talk about while loops, we'll talk about for loops, we'll talk about calculating the running total. We'll discuss using Sentinel values, which we have already used. Talk about validating input. For example, if you're asking for age of a certain number of people, you may want to limit the age to a value between 1 and 100. If you're doing employee salaries, maybe you want to limit them to a range of 0 to 10,000. So again, it all depends on what your program requirements are. And we'll also talk about having loops within loops, again, which we've already talked about these concepts. So hopefully using Python to go through these processes is not very difficult at all. All you really need to know is just the syntax of using a while loop or a for loop in order to perform these actions. So essentially, you already know that repetition allows us to essentially repeat the same code. And of course, computers are great at repeating things. So you can have a computer crunch through a bunch of numbers a billion times, and they can do it really fast also. So the idea here is to be able to repeat loop. Now, of course, the reason you want to repeat loop is depends on, again, what it is you're trying to do. So if you want to ask for the user for a series of input values, you definitely need a loop to do that. So in Python, the statement that allows us to repeat is the while keyword or while statement, followed by a logical condition, which is exactly the same as what we did when we did decision statements. So this is just a logical true-false condition, and then all your statements. And then the key here is that in Python, a loop must end with a colon. And if you do this, then Python will properly indent all your statements for you. So let's just go ahead and write some code that. So in Windows, I just type IDLE, and here's my Python idle. And I'm going to go ahead and go to this configure idle, make the font size. Well, I had it at 16. I'm going to make it like 18. So maybe I know the quality of the video may not be very good. So I'll just apply and press OK, so you can see a little bit bigger font size. Okay, so what we want to do is obviously, as you know, you want to do a file, new file. And then, because I'm going to have to save this stuff anyways, I'll just save it as. I'm going to go to a folder on my C drive called to test, and I just call it loop examples .py, and I will provide this Python file as a part of the recording that I'll post. Okay, so remember the condition, the whole idea about this was while. I need some kind of a condition. A condition could be something like while 1 is greater than 0. That's a good condition, because now of course we know 1 greater than 0 is always true. So if I did that, notice when I put the colon, it will automatically go to the next line. And let's say I say print, print hello. So what do you think is going to happen? The computer checks to see if 1 is greater than 0, which is true, so it'll print hello, and it'll go back up again. And then right now I'm only executing just one statement. If I have more, I could just do more, say by. and it also print hello and bye, and then goes back and checks the condition again. This condition will always be true, so as you may have guessed, we're going to have an infinite loop of hellos and byes. So when I run this thing is just going to go on never ending. So what I can do to stop this is just press Control C, and that will interrupt the keyboard, and then that's how you can get rid of the endless loop. Okay, so obviously we don't want something like this. That's not a good idea anyway. So I'm going to go ahead and comment this. That way, just tell you not to do it again. So what we need in real world, of course, is conditions. So suppose you say something like x is equal to 1. Well, now I'm assigning a value to x. And then I say, so long as x is less than or equal to 5, let's say, or any number. Now remember, anytime I use a constant, I can replace these constants with input statements. So I could be asking the user to tell me the beginning value of a loop and the final value of a loop. So here what I'm going to do is I'm going to say print x, and then I have to update x. Again, you should be familiar with this statement. Remember, a while loop has an initial statement, it has a logical condition, and it has a increment or update. So as you might have guessed, x is 1, 1 is less than or equal to 5 is true, so it'll print x, which is 1, and then it will make x equal to 2. Now when it makes x equals to 2, that's the last statement of the loop. It'll go all the way back up, and it'll ask, is 2 less than or equal to 5? It is, so it'll print 2. It'll make x equals to 3, and so on. So as you might expect, when value of x becomes 6, it will get out of the loop. So as a matter of fact, notice if I press enter and go backspace, I have to do a backspace to go back. So if I print x, as you might expect, I'm going to see the display of 1 through 5, and then x, which is 6, so it will be 1 through 6. So if I ran that, that's what I'm going to get. The numbers 1 through 6. Now remember, this 6 is printed because of this x that's outside of the loop. So there. So what do you think happens if I change this x to greater than 5? If I just change this to greater than 5, I'll put it back in again. As you might expect, 1 is greater than 5 is going to be false, so it will never execute the loop, and it will just print x, which is 1. So if you run this thing, you're just going to get 1 as the output of your program. So you want to make sure that you understand how this works. Now, if I say x is equal to 10, and then say while x is less than, or while x is greater than or equal to 0, notice I'm not going to put a colon here, and see what happens when I press enter. It doesn't automatically tab, and that should be your cue that this thing is going to cause a syntax error when I actually run it. So make sure you put the colon there, come out here, it's automatically indented. So now I'll print x, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to say x is equal to x minus 1. So x is 10, 10 is bigger than or equal to 0, so I'll print 10, and then x becomes x minus 1, so x is now 9. So 9 is bigger than 0, so I'll print 9, and so on till x becomes less than 0, and that's when it stops. So if I run this thing, it's going to give me the numbers 10 all the way down to 0. Of course, if I print x here, x should be negative 1. So that's really how a while loop works. And of course, remember, you can ask user for questions, right? So you could say, again, for a loop counter variable, we always use something like x or y or a or b or I or j. It doesn't really matter what you have there. So I'm going to say while x is less than or equal to 5, and here I'm going to ask the user for their name. So I'll say, well, maybe a score is better. So how about score equals float input, enter your test score, just like that. I have to. Of course, the spelling errors in here doesn't really matter. So asking the user to enter a test score, Now notice in this case, I know how many test scores there are, so so I could do the score, and then notice again when I went to the next line, it didn't automatically indent for me. That's because I'm missing a closing parentheses. So I get the score, and let's say I say total equals total plus score. So I'm accumulating scores, and of course, anytime you see something like this, you got to go here and make it 0. So as soon as I come out of, and then of course I need x equals to x plus 1, because otherwise I get an infinite loop. So when I get out of here, when I get out of this loop, can I calculate my average? Well, I can, because average is total divided by, in this case, 5. And then I'll just print average equals to AVG. Okay, so this program, now because these things are going to be annoying, what I'm going to do is just going to highlight all of these, go up to Format, and comment it. Okay, so as you expect, I'm not just writing loops to display a bunch of numbers. I can actually use loops to input data from the user and calculate a running total. So when I do run module here, it's going to ask me for a test score. Let's say I got an 80 on the first test score, and sometimes this happens. I'm going to run it again. So again, we just want to make sure that when I type 80, I don't put multiple values in, and then press enter. So test score, let's say I got 70 on the next one. Let's say I got 100 on my next one. And as you might expect, I had 5 test scores. So let's say 95, and I have an 82. Okay, so my average is 85.4. Again, what I'm doing is I'm showing you how to use a while loop, which is perfect, because with a while loop you can do anything you want. Now remember, we've done problems like this before in Raptor, is that this program will ask you for exactly 5 test scores. Well, how would you ask the user to give you a Sentinel value so that it'll stop whenever the user wants to stop? Oh, well, actually I could use some of this code for that. So I'm just going to copy that. I'm going to paste it here. I'm going to have to go ahead and uncomment this. And and this is the problem. This is the thing about Sentinel values, where you don't really know how many times you're going to repeat. So what we do for problems like this is we ask the user to enter a test score, and we tell them right here, put in, let's say, negative 99 to stop. So now the user will know that a negative 99 is going to allow us to stop the code. And we will use that. So instead of saying while x less than or equal to 5, I'll say while score is not equal to minus 99. That's it. So if the user gives you a value like 80, 80 is not minus 99. So we definitely don't need this right now. We're going to need this inside the loop, because we're going to have to ask again. So notice, let's say the score was 80. 80 is not negative 99, so I just calculated the total score. I do my accumulator because I need a count of how many data values I have. And right before going back to the beginning of the loop, I'll ask again. So notice with Sentinel values, you have to prime your loop to begin with, and get out, and inside the loop you have to repeat it. So this thing is going to ask me for as many test scores as I want, stopping only when the test score entered is negative 99. So if I gave it numbers like 100, 82, 55, and negative 99, is going to keep going through this, and as soon as that number is negative 99, it's going to stop. So when I come out of here, I shouldn't say total divided by 5 anymore, because we don't have 5 test scores. We could have had more or less. So as you might expect, this variable x is keeping track of our data. So I'll do divided by x. And just to make sure that everything is working right, I also want to print the total number of test scores, just so we know, maybe that would be an output that we may want to produce. So we say X, and maybe even print the total. Okay, so let's go through this program. I want to run this thing, and I'm just going to give it like simple values, like 1, 2, and 3 maybe. So here's 1. Oh, come on. 1, 2, and 3, and minus 99. It says, okay, the total number of test scores is 4. Well, that wasn't right, because the valid test scores was only 1, 2, 3. So the total number of test scores is wrong. As you might have guessed, I shouldn't really be dividing by x. I should be dividing by x minus 1, because even that negative 99 that I read already incremented x. Now, I could have started x at 0, by the way, and then kept this at x. So again, it doesn't matter how you do this. So you run this, and you press OK. So again, same numbers, 1, 2, 3. I expect the total to be 6 divided by 3. The average should be 2. So minus 99. And sure enough, the total number of test scores is 4. That's wrong, but the average is correct though. So I guess I should have just said x minus 1, because that's the total number of test scores. Okay, so let's try this one more time. And well, actually, I'm going to run it a couple more times. So I do 1 and 2 and negative 99. So 2 test scores, and the average is 1.5. Now, you may have noticed, what do you think happens if I run this course, and when it says give me a test score, let's say I just put in negative 99. If I do that, this program is going to crash, because negative 99, this loop will never execute, right? So I won't go here at all. It'll go here and says average equals total divided by x minus 1. And what was x? It was 1. 1 minus 1 is 0, so you're dividing by 0, which is not a good thing. And they're not going to let you get away with that. So let me go back to my window right here. So as soon as I do negative 99, it says I can't do division by 0. So remember, hopefully you remember from our previous discussions, is that you should always check for division by 0 using an if statement. So you say if x is not equal to 1, right? Because when x is 1, that means we don't have any data. If x is not equal to 1, find the average, do everything as we did before. So I press the tab key to indent. Else, I could say something like print, no data found, right? Because there's nothing to calculate the average with. So of course, anytime you make changes to code, you always want to run it. So you run the module, and so let's just do 1, 1, and 2, and negative 99. And that should be fine, just the way it was before. If I run it again and just give it negative 99 right away, I expect this to say no data found, no division by 0, which is not a good thing. Okay, so that's really essentially a discussion of while loops. So let's go back to our slides, see if I missed anything. So again, hopefully you read all of these. I think we did talk about these controlled loops. We talked about the infinite loop. If the condition isn't right, you may end up with an infinite loop. Now, a for loop is essentially a condensed while loop. Now, remember that Raptor does not have the concept of a for loop, but Python does. And the way it works is really for some variable in, you can either specify a set of values, or you can actually use a function called range to do the same thing. So notice here, I have for num in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, print num. So as you might expect, what this is going to do is going to iterate through your loop, and it's just going to, it's going to pick the first value in the list and print it. pick the second value and print it, and so on. So as a matter of fact, if I went in here to my Python, let's just quickly give that a try. So let me go ahead and comment all of this also. So what we do is this: we say for some value num in, and then if I peek over here, what was our syntax? It looks like it needs a bracket, so I'll just bracket for my range of values. So in bracket, so I'll just do 1, 2, 98, and 100. Again, that's just, it doesn't matter what you put in there. And then you say print num. As you might expect, you're going to print 1, 2, 98, 100. So that's good. 1, 2, 98, and 100. Now, the range function is a lot better because you know, what if you wanted to display values between 1 and 500? Well, you don't want to list all of those numbers here. So that's why we use the range function. So I say for x in range, open parentheses. Now, if I just say range 10, you know, just one value, and then say print x, remember you're actually using this variable as your loop counter variable. So as you might expect, you're going to get the numbers, some numbers between, you know, well, I guess your question might be, well, where does this start? Because if this 10 is actually the upper value, well, it's going to start as 0, and it's going to go up to, but not including this value. So it's going to go from 0 through 9. So let's just double check that. So sure enough, it went from 0 through 9. Now, if I said go from 4, 10, that's just going to start at 4, and it's going to stop at 9. And I think right now you've already established the fact that the default range or default step size is 1, because it went to 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. They're all just you know, separated by 1. Now, what if you say comma 3? Well, now it's going to actually display 4, and then 7, and then, well, it won't do 10 because 10 is not included in the list. So here you only get the numbers 4 and 7. So let's double check that, and those are the values 4 and 7. So that's really the nice thing about the range function. So do you think I can use this range function instead of this while loop in order to grab you know, information for 5 students in this case? And of course you say, of course, why not? So, and remember, for loop is just a compact version of a while loop. It just makes your life a lot simpler if you use a for loop, especially when you know the beginning and the end of the loop. Oh, I should have uncomment, and I should do uncomment again. All right, so I'm not going to need x equal to 1 because my for loop is going to take care of it. I'm not going to use a while loop because I'm just going to do a for, and then x in range. Now, I want my range to start at 1 and go up to, remember there's 5 students, so I have to do 6 because remember that last value is not included. And I think that's all I have to do, because in this case, when I get out of this loop, the value, oh, now do I have to do x equal to x plus 1? No, I don't, and I actually should not do that because then it will do weird things for you. So it's a lot more compact, right? X is 1, you get the score, you total the score. Then it goes back to the beginning of the loop. The range, the step size is 1, so X is now 2, and then it gets the next test score, and so on. So this is a lot more compact than using a while loop. So, so what do I divide this by? What is the value of X when I exit the loop? So is it, in this case, remember it was 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. So if I just use X, then I'm set. The good thing, of course, about this is that you can change that to anything you want, and of course, you don't have to change anything here. So this thing is going to ask me for 5 values because I went from 1 to 6. Let's just quickly check that. Press OK. So enter your test score. I'm just going to give it 1, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And yep, the total of these is 15 divided by 5 would be 3. So it looks like I'm doing my average calculation properly. So if you had your choice, would you use a for loop rather than a while loop? I would use a for loop because I know upfront how many test scores I have. Now remember again that the number of students in this case, or the number of test scores, that could be an input by the user. So again, anytime you see a number, a constant, you can safely change those with variables and of course input from the user. Okay, so let's do that. All right, let me close this a little bit. Okay, so let's go back to our here. Okay, so that was that, and I think the rest of these are you should just essentially read your book or read any of the material that I've posted on the web in Canvas on looping, but really that's about it. So this talks about the range function. These slides are also pretty good to study. And now they have this concept of a shortcut assignment statement that you don't really need to use, but you need to know how they're used. So instead of me saying x equals x plus 5, I can say x plus equal to 5. Instead of y equals to y minus 2, I do y minus equal to 2. Essentially, all you do is you put the operator right before the equal sign. So do you think instead of saying total equals total plus score, can I just do total plus score? And the answer is yes, you could do that, and that is the shortcut for, this is shortcut for total equals total plus score. Again, this is something that I don't expect you to use, but if you use them, it'll be okay. But you should know how they're used or how the process works. And it's really as simple as this, is that you're just combining one operation with the equal sign. Sentinels, we already talked about. That's where we said, hey, give us a score of -99 to stop. So I kind of jumped the gun here. And with Sentinels, you always want to use a while loop because you don't know how many items the user is going to provide for you. Input validation. Now, again, we've talked about validation in Raptor. Essentially, validation means that you want to make sure that the user enters a data value that's within some kind of a range or it's a valid value. So if your employees don't always make somewhere between $1 and $10,000, then you shouldn't be accepting anything outside of that range. If the test scores are between 0 and 100, then you shouldn't be accepting anything outside of that range. Otherwise, you have this garbage in, garbage out concept that your programs are going to have logical errors in them. So let's do that quickly. Let's ask the user. Let's go back to here. Actually, here. And what we want to do is I'm going to go ahead and comment all of these. Format, comment. And I'm going to go right here. I'm going to ask the user to input their test score. So actually, I could just copy that, can't I? So I'm just going to ask the user to enter their test score. So score equals to test score. And then I'm going to say, but I'm going to tell them that, kind of give them a hint that valid values are between 0 and 100, right? So you're not going to accept anything outside of this range. So all I have to do is do a while. And so long as the score is less than 0, that's outside of that range, or score is greater than 100, notice the use of or. Don't use and because it's not going to make sense. You're saying so long as score is less than 0 or bigger than 100, you want to tell the user to try again. So there, I'm just going to copy that, paste it here, and just tell them something like invalid, enter a enter your test score, and then and that's it. This is your data validation. This forever will ask the user to input a value and then validates it. So notice when and then let's say, just to verify that everything's good, right outside of that loop, I'm going to display the score. So as you might expect, if I run this code, and it's asking me to input my score. So if I put in 50, is 50 less than 0? False. Is 50 greater than 100? False. So both of these is false. So I'm not going to go in the while. Essentially, I'm going to exit the loop. So I'm just going to print my score. So notice is print 50, and that's that. Now, if I run this again, and let's say I give it a -7. Well, when I press enter, it's going to say invalid. How about 123? Invalid. And you can go on forever, and it just keeps telling you this is invalid until you put in something like 40, and it says, okay, game again, and it does that for you. Now, do you think I could have just taken this here, this processing right there? I'm going to copy that. I'm going to comment this. Remember a few seconds ago, or a few minutes ago, we had this loop, format uncomment. We had this loop that went from 1 to 6 and asked for a test score, right? And now all I have to do is say, well, right now I'm not validating test scores. The user puts in -5, it doesn't care, it just adds it up. So as soon as I get the test score, can I just copy and paste, or essentially paste that piece of code that I had? Now remember, I have to do a tab so it will indent. Right after I read the score. This is an example, by the way, of a nested loop. Notice how you have a for loop here, and then you have a while loop here. So essentially, this loop is repeated for as many values of x that you have. Okay, so let's see how this works. So I'm going to ask for the test score, and if the user gives me like 82, is 82 less than 0? False. Is it bigger than 100? False. So it won't tell me this at all. It will just go in and calculate the total for me. So if I give it correct values, it works just fine. Now, what if when it says score 82, instead of 82, I give it 800? Well, 800 less than 0 is false, but 800 greater than 100 is true. So it's going to say invalid, and it's never going to go here as long as I haven't given it the correct value. So this is how we add validation to our existing loops. That's how easy it is. So let's go double check. So we're going to run this thing. So we're going to go give it all good values. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Works the way it's supposed to because everything was valid. Now, when it says enter test score, if I give it a 1 is okay. How about 123? Well, that's not okay. So it's going to ask me to enter my test score. How about if I insist on giving it a -9? It says you can't do that. But if I do 2, 2 should be okay. Now it's going to ask me for the next one. Now, what if I try to give it something, outside of the range? Well, the same loop is going to catch it for me. So I give it 5, 4, and then 5. And notice the average still comes out as 3. And that's how we validate input. Okay? So, and this is also an example of what we call nested loops, because you have a loop within another loop. And there's no limit on how many times you can nest your looping. Okay, so we talked about input validation loops, and nested loops is what we just talked about, and that's it. So I do have one example of nested loops that I already wrote, so I just want to give that to you. I'll bring this up right here, and we can quickly go over it and see what it does. So I'm going to go back in here. Let me go ahead and comment all of these. All right, so I'm right there. Okay, so what do you think is going to happen? I have for a student in range 1 to 3. Well, that looks like I have 2 students, right? Remember, this 3 is not included, so it'll be 1 and 2. And then let's say for each student I have 3 assignments. So look, I have a nested loop that goes from 1 to 4, meaning I have 3 assignments. Now I'll grab the homework assignment, homework score, I total it, and then when I exit this loop, notice this indentation for AVG has to be essentially on the same level of this inner loop. Otherwise, if I put AVG in here, that's going to be all wrong because it will calculate AVG total divided by 3 inside this loop. So it's very important to get the indentation properly done. So think about this. Student is 1. And when a student is 1, I'm going to start a loop that goes from 1 to 3. So I'm going to perform some action. When I exit, I have a total for that student. I divide it by 3, and then I print the average for that student. And then it goes all the way back to the beginning of this loop. Student now is 2, and then I'm going to repeat all of this again. Now, so let's go ahead and run this quickly and see if this works. And again, we just use regular numbers, small numbers, so we can verify that. So enter homework score. I'm going to do 1 and 2 and 3. So that gives me the average as 2. Let's say for the homework score, I'm going to give it, I'm going to give it the same value, see what I get, right? It should get 3 again. So again, it's going to ask me for 3 test scores. This is for the next student, 1, 2, and 3. What happened? The average is 4. Why isn't the average 2? Because it's the same set of numbers. I'm sure most of you, or some of you, guessed that. And the fact that this total equal to 0 is done right outside of this outer loop. And so essentially for the second student, that total keeps accumulating. So what we need to do is we need to take this total equal to 0 and set it equal to 0 right there. That way for every student, we start a fresh total. So now if I run this, this will be my last run of this program. So it's 1, 2, 3, that gives me an average of 2. I'm going to give it 1, 2, and 3, and an average of 2, so it's no longer 4. I have no logical errors, and I think this program is going to work. Again, remember, instead of 3, I can ask the user to see how many students are to be processed. And instead of 4, I can ask the user for how many homework assignments are to be processed. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and stop right here. Again, I will provide this file for you so you can go ahead and work with it. I am done with, I suppose, this chapter on repetition. I hope this was helpful. Till another recording, goodbye for now.